everyone, welcome to today's episode where we're going to talk about pros and cons of living on riverfront property in the Tahlequah, Cherokee County area. I would love to say that we have tons and tons of riverfront property. We really don't have that much, but because we get so many inquiries, I thought I would hop on here and do a podcast about it. So first thing that we're going to talk about today is just basically the allure of river frontage and living at the river. People just fall in love with moving water. There is just something about it that is very calming, very relaxing, and very, very desirable. Popular spots along the Illinois River that people want to be near is the second reason people come in and are looking for that river frontage. They have their favorite maybe restaurant or bar, or they have their favorite floating institution that they always go to and they would never float with any other company. And then also it's just an ideal weekend getaway. They can turn it into an Airbnb when they're not there. And then also we have a lot of people who it's kind of their forever home or where they want to retire to. So those are some of the reasons the river frontage is so popular. Some common myths about river frontage property is that it floods every year. Believe it or not, it does not flood every year. It's hard to believe right now because we are having torrential rains, but it really just kind of depends on the year from year to year, and then also the season to season. Just because the river gets high, that does not actually indicate flooding, so it would just depend on the elevation and the flood maps. The second myth is you can do whatever you want on riverfront property because it's in the county. That is not true. There are definitely some restrictions. I think one of the biggest things that people don't realize is there are certain areas that you cannot build permanent structures on when it comes to the river frontage, and that you cannot remove any soil or gravel from river frontage. Those are two big things that will get you in big trouble immediately. Next myth is that insurance, you can't get insurance on river frontage property. It's not true. There are companies that will do that, and sometimes it's very manageable. There are keys to the elevation and kind of knowing what you're getting into, though. And then the last myth is that all riverfront properties are kind of like cabins or weekend. Believe it or not, we have a lot of luxury homes that are water frontage on the river. So those are some of the myths that we see when it comes to river frontage. Things that you want to keep in mind if you are looking at river frontage property is maintenance, and these are maintenance must-dos. I think the first and biggest one is erosion. The river will change courses, and you may own across the river this spring and summer, and next year you may not own all the way across because the river will change courses. And when it's changing courses, a lot of times it will erode your bank or your property line, and that's why now all of a sudden you own across the river because the river came more into your property. So erosion is a big thing that is manageable, but you do have to be knowledgeable of what the rules and guidelines are. The second item would be your septic system, your sewer system. When you're dealing with river frontage property, you do have to have a minimum amounts of land because your lateral lines cannot be within so many feet of the river, and or depending on the elevation. So working closely with the Department of Environmental Quality is very, very important when it comes to the septic system on a river frontage property. Mold and humidity levels in the home. We, at certain times of the year, like right now, everything is very lush, very green, and a lot of the river frontage properties, you have lots of trees. The trees are good to maintain the erosion or to prevent erosion, but they can also cause your home to not get much sunlight and be in a shaded area. And then you also have the moisture. So mold can be an issue if you're not keeping the home aired out and just not aware of some of those concerns. And mildew is more prominent and pervasive, and it can also cause damage. Most people don't realize that, so make sure you stay on that. Winterizing your home. Most of the properties on river frontage typically tend to be crawl space, so there are some additional steps that you want to take. We actually have a river property, and we try to use an electrical heat tape underneath. It's just a different level of cold when you're near the water than here in town, so be mindful of that. And then landscaping is probably the last one. Being aware that you can over landscape a property that is near the water. It kind of leads back to the erosion aspect of it, and being mindful of what will work in a really wet and boggy area and what won't work and could actually cause some issues for you. So just being mindful of that is important. So a recap of do's and don'ts, or pros and cons. I think pros and cons would be more appropriate here. Stunning views and just like a relaxed lifestyle would definitely be a pro. The river access for kayaking, fishing, tubing, swimming, or just watching the wildlife. A great Airbnb potential. People are crazy for water frontage when it comes to Airbnbs. And then just a strong resale in a niche market. And it is a niche market because these properties do not come up very often. And when they do, they go very, very quickly. So if your goal and desire is definitively to purchase a riverfront property, you really should already be with a lender and have a pre-approval letter, and then put it on your calendar and update that pre-approval letter every 90 days. Because guys, when something comes up, you are not going to have time to go get your updated pre-approval letter. That property is going to sell very, very quickly. Now, cons are things that you want to keep in mind before pulling the trigger: your floodplain status, and then the availability of insurance based upon that. Limited availability as far as the amount of land. You're not going to get acres and acres typically. It's a smaller parcel. If you do get acres and acres, be prepared to pay highly for that. The next con would be zoning restrictions or building restrictions. We're popular for saying, well, it's in the county, you can do what you want, but that big restriction does come up when it is a water frontage property, because we are all about the ecosystem and maintaining the river and making sure we don't do anything that's going to hurt that. And then the last con, if you will, is the seasonal traffic. If you like it really, really quiet and you don't want to see anyone, maybe water frontage is not your best bet, because during the season of floating, you could have upwards to 100,000 people on that river floating past your property. And unfortunately, they are there to party or partay, I guess. So those are just some tips to keep in mind when you're looking at purchasing river frontage property. And I think the number one tip that I would say is make sure that you hire a local realtor who is familiar with the area, because if you bring your realtor in from Oklahoma City, you could end up in quite the pickle if you're not familiar with some of these pros and cons. Okay, I hope that helps everyone with their journey of purchasing their dream riverfront property. Of course, we're here to help, and thank you as always for watching, and please like, follow, and share.